Long-time listener, first-time writer. I'm a woman in her early 20s working my way through college and trying to come out the other side with as little debt as possible. I've never had a reason to write into you before, but bro, something majorly effed up happened to me last month and I'm thinking, dang, I'm gonna send this into Let's Read. And so I do a bit of this, a bit of that, but one of my hustles is working as an Uber Eats driver when I have spare time from my other jobs or from going to the gym. I always gotta be on that graft, you know what I'm saying, brosif? No, anyways, this one day I get an order that comes up on the app, a McDonald's delivery, and I accept it because I'm nearby. I don't recognize the address, which is odd because I know this town pretty well, but whatever. I took the order, waited longer than usual for the teenage workers to get their thumbs out of their butts and prepare the food, and then off I headed to my delivery location. It turns out it was right at the edge of the perimeter that we're allowed to deliver within, so basically the food was going to be cold as crap when it got there, and still, not my problem, I thought. They ordered it knowing the expected delivery time, and that's what microwaves are for. Now, I only say this because the further I got from the McDonald's, the more run-down and grody the neighborhoods got. We started in a sort of run-down urban area in the first place and then drove through a suburb that looked like it had been cursed by the demon of poverty itself. It kind of looked like the way movies portrayed Detroit when they're trying to emphasize how bad it can be, but also maybe even more abandoned. There was barely any graffiti, which was weird, like even the criminals and the youth gangs didn't want to hang out in this area, it seemed. And no wonder I'd never heard of the place before. Now, I heard fear being described on a podcast as bone prickles not long ago, and that term struck me as perfect. Driving with this goddamn McDonald's, the smell of fries and Big Macs making me feel kinda sick, I started suffering with the bone prickles. And the moment I heard the guy say that phrase on the podcast, I knew exactly what he meant. It's like when your entire body tingles and prickles thanks to some kind of unspecified fear, and I was feeling this just by driving to the delivery location. Now, eventually I reached this address, and it was on the very edge of some rundown suburbia. Now, if this house had been the only occupied property on the block, I wouldn't have been surprised. The rest of the houses were completely dark, boarded up, and run down. This one house had light spilling out of every window and chill, relaxing music playing loud enough for me to hear as I pulled up to the curb outside. Some kind of pop punk or something kind of fun. Now I manhandled the bag that keeps the food warm, although with how long it had taken to arrive at that location, I didn't have much faith in their fries being hot anymore. Again, everything had fallen within the promised delivery time, so no issues there. I hauled butt up the driveway, surprised at how heavy their food order was, and I knocked. It took a few knocks before the volume of the music inside lowered, and the door was answered by a pretty-looking guy, a very reassuring gentleman. Now, he must have been in his mid-20s, and he was wearing a band tee and had a goofy expression that made me think that he might have been stoned. Now, I explained that I was there to deliver the food, and he yelled back in the house that some chick was here with the McDonald's had anyone ordered any food. I explained that that was a pretty large order, so maybe it was for a bunch of them, and he seemed pretty confused by this. Now, he said that there was only 3 of them in the house, and they'd recently gotten a delivery pizza, so he couldn't really explain who'd ordered the McDonald's. I showed him the app and confirmed 100% that the address was correct, and he asked me to wait on the porch while he went and checked with the rest of the guys, and so I was just stuck standing there while I heard vague noises from within. Muffled voices turned into banging and almost shouting, and I began to feel that bone prickle again. Eventually, this goofy streamer reappeared at the front door. Now remember, I still had the food in the thermal bag at this point, and he apologized profusely, saying he was an idiot and the other guys had ordered McDonald's as well as pizza, and everything was all good. However, just as I started to unzip the bag, he told me to hang on because they wanted to offer me a tip. I told them they could do it through the app and they didn't have to do it at all, but this guy was absolutely adamant that they were going to give me $10 for the trouble, so if I could just wait on the porch again, he'd head inside and get the cash. Now, who even keeps cash around these days, to be honest? Now anyways, this time he left the door open just enough for me to see inside. The front door opened into the living room, and I was kind of impressed how clean and frankly awesome the place looked. They had framed posters on the wall, a couple of pinball tables in the corner, and an expensive-looking flat-screen TV. Now, this didn't seem to be the room that they were hanging out in either, and I sort of nosily peered around to see where my new delivery friend had gone to find my tip. Now, I saw him milling about back and forth past the door to what seemed to be a kitchen, and then calling out down a set of stairs to what looked like a basement. I wondered if they had an even more impressive home theater system down there or something, and I wondered if it was just one of those cases where someone with money buys a house that looks run down from the outside in an abandoned neighborhood area and then just uses the crappy exterior to actually mask a really awesome dwelling. Now still, it was none of my business. Now eventually my new friend came back with $10.69 and I just politely laughed at the obvious joke. Now I finally fished out the huge bags of McDonald's out of the insulated bag and I could tell already that by now they were cold, and I figured I just wouldn't make mention of it. This guy had kept me on the porch long enough at this point. Now after thanks and some goodbyes, I headed back to my car, got in, and then checked for more jobs. There was another one at the same McDonald's, so I figured why not. It had just come through, so by the time I reached the restaurant, the order should be ready. So I started to drive off. I have one of those reversing cameras in my car, and I admit I rely on it a little bit too much, so my rearview mirror isn't perfectly aligned like it should be. Instead, it lets me view the back seat, something I'd adjusted for it recently when I was taking my niece and nephew out for, ironically, McDonald's. And as such, glancing into the rearview mirror allowed me to notice that there was someone lying on the floor in the back seat. Now, I could tell he was a guy in his mid-20s, and I also could tell that he was holding some kind of weird knife, and I don't know how to describe it. It was clearly some type of kitchen implement, but I'd never seen a knife like that before. And I suddenly realized that the delivery customers had kept me at the door for so long without turning back to my own vehicle that it could have allowed one of them to actually slip inside. Now, I didn't expect to be more than a minute or two, so I didn't lock the car behind me, and now I was regretting that immensely. What the hell did this guy have planned for me? He was just laying there, staring off blankly like he was waiting for something, clutching that kitchen blade. Now, obviously, whatever he had planned was nothing good, and the first thing I did was I decided to do a stop looking in the rearview mirror, and I didn't want him to see that I'd seen him. Now, obviously, this was all happening within a split second. My heart was absolutely pounding, and I was certain that this was how I would die, with my throat slit as I was heading to an Uber Eats delivery. Now, up ahead, I saw the lights of a gas station. I kept my speed normal and I didn't allow myself to react at all, and then moments before I reached the turning into the gas station, I shot forward, screeched into the parking lot, leapt out of my car, and then ran into that gas station. Now, I must have sounded like some crazy woman, yelling how a delivery customer stoner McDonald's order guy was hiding in my backseat and had a weird knife, and I didn't know what he had planned, and blah, blah, blah. I was just trying to explain the events and my theory and how I thought the delivery customer had distracted me, and I was almost telling all of this at once. Now, the clerk, an older man, looked at me like I was on meth, understandably so, and then started to ask me to explain everything again. However, he kind of froze and his mouth was now hanging open, and I followed his gaze. An absolutely ridiculously tall man was kind of unfolding himself from my back seat, and we watched as he fled into the darkness of the night. Now, bear in mind, this was on the edge of the suburbs, so he fled into some kind of forested area, and from the expression on his face, I couldn't even claim to this day that he meant me harm, and almost looked like he was petrified too. Of course, that didn't stop me calling the cops. They got to the gas station really fast and searched the nearby area. They did, in fact, find a knife nearby. Apparently, it was some kind of fish knife for sushi, but it had nothing on it. When they paid to visit the delivery customers, they were just as baffled as I was. Everyone was accounted for, which they could prove, and nobody who lived there matched the description that I gave of the guy who'd crept into my back seat. Now, I never did find out who he was or what his motives were. I didn't quit my delivery job or anything silly like that. I just took to actually locking the car door whenever I stepped out to make a delivery, regardless of how brief I thought it would be. And I always check the back seat no matter what. Something tells me that the guy hiding out in my car didn't mean me harm, but the look of fear and alarm on his face as we watched him flee makes me think that someone out there would have done us more harm than I can even fathom if they'd found it. It's one of those creepy mysteries that I'm grateful didn't turn into an unsolved murder and has finally given me something to write into you about. But like they say, be careful what you wish for, because I feel like this was a cautionary tale where the lesson is that it's far better not to wish you had a scary story to share with internet people. So I'm from England, and I won't say where so as not to dox myself or lose my job, but I'm a postwoman, or a postie as we say here, and I love my job. I work a rural route, and I've been on the same route for years, thanks to some pleading and a friendship with the head postmaster. Normally, posties get shifted around all the time. And so I kind of know everyone on my little route, at least everyone who makes themselves known to me anyway. There was Stu, a mature student who would always be waiting at the door whenever the mail came and shared his latest work on marine biology with me. I hadn't started out as being remotely interested in marine biology, but Stu had mentioned a few things in passing, and I'd been hooked, pun intended. Now there was old Mrs. Rader, who always seemed to have some insane medical ailment, which she'd relay to me with the greatest of glee, and I became convinced that she was a medical miracle. And then there was the Four Bottoms, an extremely flamboyant glam rock band by night and a middle-aged polycule who enjoyed cardigans and gardening by day. And then there was Joe and Joanne, two twins with rich parents who often got Amazon parcels in the mail, and I've never seen two kids who were more spoiled but more grateful for everything they'd got. Now the one guy I never got to know was Farmer McKay, the allegedly grouchy postman-hating farmer who lived in the small holding on the outskirts of town. Now to call it a farm would be extremely generous, but it did have a few goats, a couple of sheep, a pig, and some chickens, and it was also filthy, even by farm standards, and as far as I know, he made an entire living selling eggs and milk to locals. Now I gotta admit, I prefer Sainsbury's. Now one day, for the first time in about 6 years of doing this route, I was shocked to find that I had a collection for McKay's farm. Not everyone knows this, but you can book Royal Mail to collect parcels, often for free, instead of having to take them to a post office. McKay had booked a free collection with instructions absolutely not to knock and disturb him, but instead find the package in an outhouse which he kindly uploaded a picture of so there was no mistaking it. Now I made sure that I wore my wellies that day as I didn't fancy wading across the sludge that McKay called a yard. It turns out I made the right call because the mud leading to the safe place outhouse was almost up to my ankles. When I opened the outhouse, I was met with a smell that almost made me gag. I didn't even want to look at what else he kept in there, but thankfully the Royal Mailbox was visible right at the front, so I grabbed it and headed back to my van. Now halfway back to my vehicle, I noticed that the parcel was leaking. Real disgusting, foul-smelling liquid dripping out of the bottom of the box. Well, there's absolutely no way that I can take this as a collection for a million reasons. And now, I also couldn't just abandon it, which meant that I had to break his cardinal rule and go knock on his door and tell him that, unfortunately, I couldn't accept his collection. Halfway between my van and the front door of the farm, the package I'm carrying sort of collapses inward. The bottom falls out and the contents spill all over my bottom half. Now let me tell you, I've smelled some bad smells in my time. Before I became a postwoman, I was a nursing assistant in my late teens and early 20s, and there was this one old lady that I treated who I would swear had death himself living in her nether regions. This made that smell like flowers and cinnamon. It was a pile of rotting, liquefying organs, and now it was covering as much of my legs and torso as it managed to besmirch. I dropped the destroyed parcel and threw up there and then, which really didn't help matters. And now I was kind of mad at Farmer McKay. There are extremely strict rules about what you can and can't mail in the UK, and rotting, liquefied offal is definitely a forbidden item. I didn't even need to check the handbook to know about that. But then I started looking at all that stuff. Maybe my imagination was running away from me, but I was sure that I could make out part of a human spine among the gore. An eyeball winked out at me, clearly fresher than some of the other unspecified parts that covered me, the ground, and everywhere. Now, I suddenly got this idea that McKay was trying to use the Postal Service to hide evidence of a crime. And standing out there in the open in the center of this small holding in the middle of nowhere, I suddenly felt very vulnerable and exposed. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I was convinced my colleagues would give me absolute crap if I fled the scene, but I started picturing Farmer McKay hiding behind a curtain, looking out one of the windows, a cocked shotgun aimed right at me. And so I kind of ran toward the main house. As the front door began to open before I even reached the porch, I wondered if I'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. But the man who stood on the doorstep wasn't Farmer McKay. I could see the resemblance, but he was a much younger man, and as he took in the sight of me covered in those organs and trembling in fear, I could see genuine guilt and regret on his face. He didn't invite me inside. You can hardly blame him. I was dripping in unspecified corpse juices. But there on the doorstep, he explained that Farmer McKay had been taken away by doctors the day before after increasingly strange and erratic behavior that had gone unnoticed by his family. He apologized profusely for the parcel collection being overlooked because they should have known that something was awry. McKay never sent packages. I was severely shaken, not least because I couldn't face the idea of getting in my beloved post van covered in this. And thankfully, the grandson, as that's who he turned out to be, helped me hose off the worst of it before I headed back to my van. It's what I saw in the back that really caused this to be a scary story, though. I made the mistake of glancing into the dilapidated barn as I trekked across the mud to my post van, and I only caught a quick glimpse because I looked away as quickly as possible. But no matter how many hot showers I took to wash off all those juices and the gore from my body, I can never scrub the sight that I saw from my mind. In the barn, Farmer McKay had piled what were presumably all of his animals. I couldn't make out which species they were. They'd all melted into one festering, indiscernible pile of corpses. A number of empty cardboard boxes sat nearby, and I can only assume McKay planned on shipping the remains of his animals to various places. To this day, it drives me mad that I never checked and don't remember who the recipient of the original parcel was. I have no idea what his motive was for mailing these liquefied parts, and I guess that's partly the problem with whatever was wrong with him, dementia or whatever had befallen him. It doesn't make sense. He could have been aiming for revenge on his enemies, and he could have believed that he was shipping genuine prime cuts to customers of his farm. Either way, I'm not sure I ever want to know. The McKay small holding was demolished not long after, and after what I saw, I can't say I'm at all sorry that it became one less stop on my postal route. No, I'm just going to admit this up front. I was an absolute a-hole in college. Like the kind of smug, not quite rich jokester, prankster who thinks he's way funnier than he is. And I'm also glad this was around 15 years ago, because a few years later, and I genuinely think that I would have tried to launch a career as one of those intolerable YouTube pranksters. You know the ones I'm talking about. Now thankfully my pranking days extended solely to being the class clown, and this led to a certain fraternity paying attention to me and encouraging me to pledge, so I did. Honestly, I loved the hazing. I was the one getting pranked, sure, but it made me the center of attention, and I was always up for going a step further than my fellow pledges. Now looking back, I probably came across like the most cringe tryhard imaginable, and the frat bros scouting me out must have thought that they'd lucked out with a clueless gooner like me. Now, I still wonder to this day whether if things had turned out differently, I would have been rejected from the fraternity anyway, and I kind of think that maybe I would have as the ultimate prank. And so when I was doing my initiation, it was back when Amazon had just gotten really big, and with their meteoric rise, we'd also seen a decline in the quality of delivery drivers. It was that weird period between Amazon drivers treating your packages like a Goomba from Mario, and Ring doorbells only existing for the rich and famous. And so regularly, Amazon packages were just free for the taking, dumped into people's yards or left on their front doorsteps ready for some complete idiot like me to come along and swipe them, and then inevitably trash the contents unless it was something really good, which it never was. Now, I must have stolen upwards of 15 packages from poor, stupid Amazon customers. Now, one time I got a box of lingerie, and another time there was this wiener pump, and those are literally the only two remotely interesting things I stole. Mostly I just took people's vitamins, a dog bowl, a little plush toy, and some exercise equipment and other assorted stuff. And then one day, I saw it. A large, tantalizing package sitting on a doorstep just there for the taking. It had to be something good, like a microwave oven or a custom kitchen delivery. It just had to be, and I knew it. Now, I could feel it in my bones, so I had my idiot cameraman, another pledge, film me creeping up to do a crab walk in a hoodie and jeans like I was some type of Temu iDubbbz. And then I grasped the package with both hands and yanked it backwards. It exploded. And I don't mean one of those cute glitter bombs that they use now. I mean, it literally exploded. It burned my face and scorched my hoodie, the polyester, right to my skin. No, I was screaming and disoriented and in absolute agony. My cameraman, the coward that he was, had already shrieked and ran away. And then they came, leaping out of the bushes, a group of masked men waiting for me to try to steal that package. Now, I was down for the count, suffering from what felt like third-degree burns, but realistically were probably only first-degree. They felt worse, though, as the masked men started kicking and punching me. They were yelling at me for being a thief, a scum, a criminal. They said I was everything wrong with America, that I was ruining the fabric of this goddamn country. All because I tried to steal an Amazon package as part of a fraternity prank. And you know what? I can't disagree with them. I was a prick, and I deserved a kicking. And I can't say I deserved the shattered eye socket or the permanent limp or the shattered arm that required a metal rod to hold it together, and maybe that punishment was a bit extreme. But at the time, I did convince myself that I deserved it. And the paramedics were called by a neighbor, obviously, long after the masked men had disappeared. But I told them I was jumped by a gang of young people from a rival college, and no, I had no idea who they were, and I preferred that they didn't pursue the crime if possible. And the cops honestly seemed all too happy to oblige. Less work, less paperwork, I guess. And I really did convince myself that I had it coming, and maybe I was right. Maybe I did. But here's the really weird part, though. I went back to that house months later, and I wasn't sure if I'd approach or not, but I decided to just watch from my car for a while. Maybe it had new owners. Maybe this wasn't who I tried to steal the package from. But the people living in the house now were a young family with 2 young kids. None of them seemed like the type to be involved in a violent assault. And so to this day, I don't know if I was targeted by someone related to the household or a group of violent vigilantes who were going after people like me. Now, the latter idea is kind of terrifying because it kind of makes me wonder, what if they decided that I haven't changed my ways enough and come after me again? Now, I've tried my best. I've tried to be a clean living boy, and one thing's for sure. I did not pursue joining that fraternity after all, and a regular dorm room and weekly chess club is all the excitement I want in my life. Thank you very much.